Hello, and welcome to Mrs. PM Reads Christian Content, where we are continuing in Brave by Faith by Alistair Begg. In our last video, we basically learned the beginning. We were in the beginning of Daniel, the book of Daniel in the Bible, and we learned about how Daniel and his friends were basically kidnapped and brought to Babylon and made to change their names and be re-educated and reclothed and basically being, I can't think of the proper word, but coming into Babylonian lifestyle. But they were supposed to eat and drink the same food that the king was eating and drinking. And that is where they chose to draw their line, because there's strict Jewish rules on what God's people can eat and drink. And the Babylonians were partaking in things other than that. And so these guys said, nope, we're not doing that. And that is where we left off. So we're still in chapter 1. The subtitle of this section is Putting It to the Test. Now, Daniel needs to persuade the chief of the king's eunuchs to allow them to eat different food. It's not that if the chief says no, Daniel will give in. It's simply that it's better to get the people in authority to agree to his approach than to have to do it in defiance of them. The chief likes the 4 Jews, but he likes his head being on his shoulders more. And he is not willing to risk the king's displeasure in order to let Daniel do what he wants. Verse 10. I, like you, he says, like you, Daniel, he says, and I understand you have your beliefs. But this is not going to fly because I value my life too much. You'll have to fit it in. You'll have to fit in on this one, Daniel. But Daniel has drawn the line. He doesn't see the chief's response as evidence that God's will is that he and his friends should compromise. He won't give up. The CEO has proven unwilling. So he goes to the COO, the steward, and suggests a deal. Verses 12 and 13. How about you give us 10 days of eating only vegetables and water, and then compare our appearance with the appearance of the guys who have been eating the king's food, and deal with your servants according to what you see. This is gutsy. Daniel is saying, we are going to put this to a test. We're going to obey what we know to be right, and we're going to trust God to come through for us. So the 10 days pass, and they all line up, and it, in quotes, it was seen that they were better in appearance and fatter in flesh than all the youths who ate the king's food. So the steward took away their food and the wine they were to drink and gave them vegetables, unquote. Verses 15 and 16, which they ate for the next 3 years of training and education. The chief of eunuchs presumably knew nothing of it and must have congratulated himself as he saw them growing fatter and stronger, that he had refused to let Daniel go without the meat and the wine. It's worth pointing out, as an aside, that these verses are not offering us a diet to follow ourselves. After all, Daniel and his friends ended up fatter, not thinner. That was the whole point. And the reason they looked so good at the end of the 10-day test and after the following 3 years was not the Daniel diet. It was the Lord's miracle. This is not about superfoods. It is about the supernatural. God showed himself strong. These men should have looked gaunt and withered and pathetic, but they looked vibrant and terrific and had a glow to their skin. Why? Because God did it. Every day they passed in those 3 years, when they woke up and looked in the mirror, those 4 men would have been reminded that God is no man's debtor, and he is able to show himself strong. And the next section is entitled, How to Stand Firm. Why were these 4 men willing and able to know their line and stand firm and refuse to cross it when they were being placed under pressure that most of us can only imagine? Because of what they knew about God. 3 times in this opening chapter, we're told that God, the Lord, gave. And these words are the key to understanding the chapter. Verse 2, the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into Nebuchadnezzar's hand. Verse 9, God gave Daniel favor and compassion in the sight of the chief of the eunuchs. Verse 17, God gave them learning and skill in all literature and wisdom. God is in control. I'm going to read that again. God is in control. Sometimes I need a reminder of that. He is in control of great geopolitical events. The Babylonian invasion and victory happened because God gave Nebuchadnezzar that victory. The God who had given them great blessings through Judah's history and their lives was also the God who had given the besiegers victory. God was responsible for the exile of his people. God was responsible for the destruction of his temple. Nebuchadnezzar would take the credit, but the Lord was the one who oversaw it. And God is in control of interpersonal interactions and individual outcomes. Imagine the end of the 3 years of training when the king commanded that all the students, including our 4 guys, should be brought before him. Imagine the chief of the eunuchs bringing them in, confident now because of their appearance and their progress. Here they are, Your Majesty. The program has worked exceptionally well. They're exceptional. Just look at them and then just ask them. You can see they are fine with their new names. They are well versed in our literature and philosophy. In terms of physical fitness, these 4 are standouts. This internship program is a clear success. But what the king and his chief didn't know was that God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, was in control. God was in control of Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah's relocation. God oversaw their re-education, and God granted them resolve and grace as they took their stand. God took them into Babylon. God was with them in Babylon, and, as we'll see, God would use them in Babylon. Another line is the next section. As Daniel stands before the chief of the eunuchs and tells him that he has resolved that he will not defile himself with the king's food or with his wine, no matter what, we can see echoes of another man living in a far more hostile foreign land, standing before a far more powerful enemy and drawing his lines and refusing to move. After all, even if we can begin to wrap our heads around the sheer otherness of Babylon for the Jewish exiles, we are still nowhere near understanding the foreignness of this earth to the Lord Jesus when he left the glory of heaven and stepped down into the limitations of time and space and the difficulties of this broken world. He was willing to become one of us, to live in a world that was bent on resisting his Father. But he was not willing to disobey even after 40 days alone in the wilderness. And he ate nothing during those days, and when they were ended, he was hungry. The devil said to him, "If you are the Son of God, command this stone to become bread." And Jesus answered him, "It is written, man shall not live by bread alone." And that's from Luke 4, verses 2-4. Know your God is the next subtitle. So the real emphasis of this chapter, as with every chapter of Daniel, is not so much Daniel as God. You and I will only live brave like Daniel did if we first know the God who Daniel did. Here is the God Daniel knew from a young age. Back in Judah, when Daniel was growing up with his family, with no inkling of the Babylonian crisis that was to come, he would have recited this at the beginning and end of every day. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your might. Deuteronomy 6, verses 4 and 5. And though years later, Daniel found himself in an alien environment with a different name, reading different books and hearing a different language, with his land invaded, his king defeated, and his temple eviscerated, he was not going to stop loving the God who he knew and who he knew stood behind all things, including the worst things. Here is the God who has given us every situation and every challenge we find ourselves in, and who is in control of our country and our century as much as he was over Babylon in the 6th century BC. We are not and never have been in Israel. We do not, in fact, live in a city on the hill. For no nation today enjoys a special status before God. Where is Jerusalem today? It is not in the US. It is not in the UK, despite William Blake's hopes that it could be built in England's green and pleasant land. It is not in the Middle East either. It is in heaven. Our Lord Jesus told the Roman governor Pilate that his kingdom was not of this world. John 18, verse 6. No, we live in this world, in Babylon, but God's kingdom, and not my nation, is where we belong and where we will be at home. And if we confuse the two, we open ourselves up to confused loyalty and a compromised faith. Wow. I love that. This is very powerful. Okay, let's see, where are we? Okay, here we go. I'm going to read that part again because it's just powerful. No, we live in this world, in Babylon, which is in quotes. But God's kingdom, and not my nation, is where we belong and where we will be at home. And if we confuse the two, we open ourselves up to confused loyalties and a compromised faith. We are in Babylon, and God is sovereign even here. Nothing is actually out of control, and nothing is about to get out of control. But given the pushback of 21st century secularism, you and I are going to face challenges. The crisis will come. The moments will arrive when we are called to go with the flow of our culture rather than obedience to our God in the workplace or the sports club, or in how we raise our children, or what we say from our pulpits, and so on. Those crises will reveal what is inside us. Don't assume you'll stand firm in those moments. Equally, don't assume you will have to give in. Resolve now. Think through where to draw the lines you will not cross. We will not necessarily all draw all our lines in the same places. Take the promotion of the transgender agenda in public state-run schools. One Christian teacher will resign before having anything to do with it. Another may stay and seek to teach Christian ethics to those who otherwise may not hear that there is a different view, resigning only if forced herself to promote transgenderism. One may be willing to wear a rainbow lanyard with his ID badge, another not. One set of Christian parents will not send their children to public school at all. Another will do so, but ensure that they are positively teaching God's design for men and women in the home and give themselves financial margin to homeschool their kids if necessary. The lines may be drawn in different places, but drawn they should be, and crossed they must not be. This is just one terrain on which lines have to be carefully, thoughtfully, prayerfully drawn. There are many others. So know your lines and know the God who will give you all you need in the situation he has put you into to enable you to stand firm for him and say, no, I am not going to give in. Woo! Wow, you guys, that's the end of chapter 1. That's just the first chapter. That could be the whole book. Wow, I love it. This is awesome. All right, I hope you are enjoying this, and I am so thankful to have had permission to read Brave by Faith by Alistair Begg to you guys here on this channel. All right, I hope you have a blessed day, and I will see you next time.